Here we go. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are right now. My name is Ana Lucia Araujo. I am here in Washington, D.C., and I host, along with Alex Gil, who is here with me, the Slaveryarchive Book Club. So I am a historian, and I am based at Howard University. Alex, he is based at Yale University. And today we are here to discuss the book which I show you first the cover, which is the book The First and the Last King of Haiti, The Rise and Fall of Henri Christophe, Knopf 2025. This is a book that was just published then a week ago, and our guest is the author of the book, Marlene Daut. Marlene, she is an author, scholar, editor, and professor. She is based at Yale University, and her books include, then she has several books. Among the single author books that she has, I will mention only some of them, then Tropics of Haiti, Race and the Literary History of the Asian Revolution in the Atlantic World. This is a book that was published 10 years ago, then it's 10-year anniversary with Liverpool University Press, Baron de Veste, that I do not have here, and the Origins of Black Atlantic Humanism, that was published with Paul Grave in 2017, and the award-winning Awakening the Ashes, an Intellectual History of the Asian Revolution, that was published with University of North Carolina Press in 2023. And this book is one of the co-winners then of the co-won the Frederick Douglass Prize of 2024. So we are not going to extend more. We are going to start because you have then a full house almost here. And Marlene, you will introduce the book for some minutes. After that, we are going to have questions. You can put your questions in the chat. You can ask your questions with your video on. We are also on YouTube streaming live this book club. Then, so if you are on YouTube, you can put your questions there in the chat as well. Then welcome, Marlene.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you to everyone who's in this Zoom for spending your Saturday here. I know it's very cold in many places in the world, as I'm looking in the chat and just seeing that people are joining us from all over, even internationally. So thank you so much. And thank you also, Alex. I'm really excited to be in conversation with you and Anna, and I love that you both have restarted this book club. So for those who've just joined, I'm Marlene Daut, author of The First and Last King of Haiti. Ooh, my background's blurred. Rise and Fall of Henri Christophe. And I am told to just give you a little bit of overview, but not any spoilers, and then we'll have a broader conversation. So I guess I'm going to preempt a question I've been getting a lot, which is, why did I write this book? What was my inspiration? So I will say that having been trained in literary studies, even on the sort of literary historical side, I first became really acquainted with Henri Christophe's story as a literary character, with him as a literary character in multiple different kinds of works. And I studied fictions of the Haitian Revolution in my first book, as Anna mentioned. And but I studied it always the interplay that those fictions had with historical writing, with writers who were making truth claims, either as eyewitnesses or they went into the archives to tell the story of the Haitian Revolution, and even the propagandistic writers like Louis Dubrocas with his two histories of the revolution commissioned by Napoleon Bonaparte. So I was really attentive always to point of view, to context, to, ideologies that authors had that caused them to write about the Haitian Revolution in certain ways. And so then it's no accident that when I came to approach the life of Henri Christophe, that I also saw that these portrayals, be they fictional or, historical in the sense that they're making truth claims, that they were also, of course, rife with issues of point of view and ideology and context of the era, but also future looking. What did those writers want other people to take away from his story for posterity? And especially so many of the writers from Christophe's kingdom, when they wrote, they said openly that we need to write these stories down ourselves, basically to try to control the narrative, but also out of fear that if they didn't, that what would remain were French narratives on the one hand, colonial narratives on another hand, because this is a multi-headed monster, and then just foreign narratives that don't serve the goals and purposes of the Haitian state at the time. Remember, the press is owned by the state up until the Boyer presidency, where you start to have independent newspapers. But previous to this, all the papers, whether they be in the Southern Republic of Haiti or in the Northern Kingdom, are associated with the government, if not direct arms of the government. So that's sort of the inspiration. Was I wanted to take a deep dive into his life and to see if I could separate out not simply what was fictional from what was historical and mythological, from what was really things that were really parts of his biography, but also their interplay. And so I hope you'll read The First and Last King of Haiti. And when you do, you'll see that I don't shy away at all from saying, here's somebody who wrote this kind of narrative and this was their goal. I kind of take readers behind the scenes, not just in the footnotes, but in the body of the text as well, to really show that writing the story of someone's life is not as easy as just kind of telling a narrative history. And I think when I first approached this project, I wanted it to be for a trade popular audience. So that's why the book is with Knopf. And I wanted to tell the story as faithfully as I could. But at certain points, I began to realize I was not going to be able to tell the story in a straightforward way if I without sort of making decisions about what we could trust as true narratives and what we couldn't, all on my own without letting the reader in. And so I will tell the reader at various points in the text, how do we know certain things that have been disputed about Christophe's life? For example, the fact that he was born on the island of Grenada, which at the time was a British colony in 1767. And that island is located in the Southern Caribbean. So it's pretty far from Saint-Domingue, the French colony where he ends up, and also, of course, which becomes independent Haiti in 1804. And so I explained to the reader that, we go back to the documentation produced by the Kingdom of Haiti, that this documentation has to have more weight than documentation from foreigners who've never met the king. And it's not even just about people who met him, people who knew him, but because these writings were produced from the state-run press that were in fact commissioned by Christophe himself, that makes them more faithful representations of, things that have to do with his family and his early years. So in every version of the Almanach Royal, there are 6 different versions, and you can check them out on my website, lagazetteroyale.com, in PDF and full text. Every version has a little genealogy. It says the King of Haiti was born on October 6th, 1767. He married Queen Marie-Louise and gives their marriage date. It gives her birth date. She had a brother who lived in the kingdom as well, Noël Croix David. It gives his birth date. The king had a nephew, Jean-Christophe. It gives his birth date. Then, of course, Christophe's children. He had 4 children with Marie-Louise, and all of their birth dates, even the deceased son Ferdinand, are in the Almanach Royal as well. And so I began to try to answer some of the thornier questions by returning to the documents produced by the Kingdom of Haiti. And that also helped me when I went searching through the Georgia Historical Society in Savannah, Georgia, like all the other researchers before me, for the documents that would definitively tell us that Christophe participated in the Battle of Savannah, in Savannah, Georgia, in October 1779. And once more, just as with his birth date and place of birth, the information was staring me straight in the face in a source that I had consulted for years, which is Baron de Vate's essay on the revolutions and civil wars of Haiti. It does have an English translation that was put out in the era in 1823, but the original French version was published in 1819, so the year before the king's death. And in that book, commissioned by Christophe, Baron de Vate, in a footnote, tells us exactly how old Christophe is, which corresponds to the birth date given in the almanacs. And he tells us that Christophe fought at the Battle of Savannah, where he was wounded. And there are other sources from the era as well that detail this information, but I think Baron de Vate is the most trustworthy one in the sense of he's writing down the story as the king would have it. But Hubert Cole, a British agent in 1799, also provides this information as well, and he was a frequent correspondent of the king. So that's just to give you a sense of some of the things that the probing questions that people have wanted to know, those are taken up and answered in the book, and they're answered in a way that I hope will be satisfying, in that I take the reader through the evidence so that it's not just one more in a long chorus of voices saying that either he was born here or he was born there. So that's just to give you a sense of process and archives. And again, the story is told in narrative fashion. In fact, at the beginning of every chapter, you'll see these italicized portions, which is kind of me narrating to a certain extent what's going to happen and who's important in various chapters. There's a lot of names and characters in the book because we go from the Siege of Granada, which is in 1779, we go all the way up to the Indemnity in 1825. So we go through many eras. We follow all of these events as through Christophe's eyes, so to speak, as he would have experienced them, and as he did experience them in the cases where we have direct sources. For example, during the Haitian Revolution, we follow him as he has the city of Cap Français burned to the ground to prevent the Leclerc expedition from landing. And we follow him to the moment when he believes Leclerc's promises that Leclerc is not going to try to restore slavery, and turns his back for the moment on Toussaint Louverture, and then tries to convince Toussaint Louverture to join once more with the French side. And we follow the aftermath of all of this very sordid story of Toussaint Louverture's death, and how Christophe experienced that. The other thing I'll say is there are images in the book that I'm really excited about. Someone said, okay, who did you bribe over at Knopf to get 44 color images? Because there are two separate inserts in the book. The book does have decal edges, so you might not notice the images at first. But if you go to page 200, you'll see the first insert. And then if you go to about page 424, I believe, you'll see the second set of inserts. And I'm so nerdily excited. I don't think nerdily is a word, but I can't think of a better word. Excited about these images because in the archives in Aix-en-Provence, the French National Overseas Archives, I was researching there, and it was my last day. And the Overseas Archives had instituted a policy where you could only get 10 items per day. 10 boxes, I should say. And the boxes are filled with sometimes hundreds of documents, but as all the historians and researchers in the audience will attest, 10 is, it's not a lot. And especially when you're in your last day of an archive as voluminous as that one. And I had spent 2 weeks there. So I'm really feeling the crunch. My husband, who is not an academic, but does have a PhD in history, offered to come with me. He got his subscription renewed so that he could come in. So now we can get 20 boxes. So I'm very excited about this. And I write down all the names that I'm looking for in these boxes. The folders are organized by family name in this particular set. And he's calling me over like this. And he's like, look, and there's a folder, and it's the Christophe folder. And it's exactly what we were in the seas. We were in Croix David, which I knew was in there. And I said, we're not gonna find a folder that's Christophe, but we can look anyway. And lo and behold, we found this folder, and original images of Christophe's house were in the folder, the plans. It links him directly to Faro, who's of course the architect of the Citadelle La Ferrière, called the Citadelle Henri in Christophe's day. So that's just to give you a little bit of a teaser about the images. And there are images of the monument to the chasseurs volontaires who fought at the Battle of Savannah in there as well. The one that depicts Christophe as a drummer boy, and there's images of the base of the monument, which tells a story that is also really interesting and has names of other of the freedom fighters, the chasseurs volontaires, who ended up in Savannah as well, like André Rigaud and Jean-Baptiste Chavannes, etc. The last thing I want to touch on before we open it up is endings. I usually have some idea in my head of what I want the ending to be. And I think initially I thought, well, I'll go quickly through the revolution and I'll get to the kingdom. And that's the kingdom of Haiti that we really want to know about. His coronation on June 2nd, 1811, the magnificent buildings and structures that he built, the Citadelle, but also his famous palace at Sans-Souci. And then, of course, the end. I'm pretty sure everybody knows how it ended, but just in case you don't, I'll just say when he died in October 1820. And I thought, well, that might be a natural ending, but the story wasn't over. And so the last two chapters of the book follow the king's wife, Queen Marie-Louise, as she attempts to deal with this death that really upends her life. She was a queen. She had princesses, a royal prince. Her son is killed in this conspiracy that leads Christophe to die as well. And she's just absolutely devastated and goes to England, eventually ends up in Italy, where she suffers more and more. But you know, histories and biographies are written by people. And so you will also get to watch or read or see, I guess, how I grapple with understanding her story in a different way, a way that was different from how I had read about her previously. Because I think, you know, our natural inclination is to say, oh, wow, Marie-Louise, her life was ruined and she really suffered. But then I came across some accounts about life in the Kingdom of Haiti that were not sensationalized. They weren't the kind of foreign accounts or the ones written by the king's enemies in the South, because of course, remember the Southern Republic, and they're having a war of words and an actual civil war, right? So it's not like it's people from the South just trying to defame the king, but these testimonies from people who labored to build the Citadelle, who worked on the farms. And it kind of made me take a step back about how am I going to write about Queen Marie-Louise that honors her story, but that doesn't make her a simple bystander in Christophe's kind of quest for, yes, Black sovereignty and securing freedom and keeping France at bay, but also wealth and power, and what is her role in that. So you get to kind of watch through my narrative interjections how I came to terms with her role and with her story. And then the very end, I talk about the indemnity, because if I really think about Christophe's legacy, yes, I look at the Citadelle, I look at the palace, I look at the culture he left behind. The writers under his kingdom produced magnificent plays and poetry and operas. Some of the operas had Creole dialogue. It's incredibly forward-looking for the early 19th century. The newspaper and print culture, the school systems that he built. But I think that his most lasting legacy is being the one who said no to the indemnity. He used one word whenever the topic was broached, and he directed his ministers and writers to reiterate the same, and that was inadmissible. It will simply not ever happen, and it will not ever be open for debate. And unfortunately, after Christophe's death, his successor, Jean-Pierre Boyer, who reunites the two sides of the country to the boundaries it has now, the Republic of Haiti, in 1820, right after Christophe's death, Boyer didn't share that same opinion. And we know how that story unfolded in 1825 when Boyer signed this disastrous indemnity agreement with France, agreeing to pay the infamous 150 million francs. So I will leave it there as we hopefully can open it up to, I think Ana and Alex are going to ask me some questions now, and then I would love to have your questions in the audience.
Thank you so much, Marlene. Let me just add here, let me see, and I don't know if I can see Alex.
I'm right here.
Here we go. Now I just wanted to add to the spotlight. Then let's see if Alex, do you want to start? And then
I
I
have
follow,
so
and
many
then
questions.
and whoever wants, you just raise your hand.
Yeah, and also please feel free to start also jotting your questions down and notes in the chat so we can do both and walk and chew gum at the same time. Marlena, thank you so much. And I've already been to 2 events where you present the book, but now I have like actually delved in, so spent like a lot of time this week delving in. I finally got my copy. And it's funny because in 2 previous one, and the last one that we was at the book club here in town, you presented a very general audience presentation where actually everything you read was like not academic at all. It was just like really just hitting the notes on his slide. And then the other one was at the AHA, and there we actually got into some like methodological questions and stuff like that. And this book exists in both of these worlds at the same time. And having gone in, I expected before going in, I told you this at the AHA, that I was going to ask you questions about the royalism versus republicanism. That's a super geek question. I'll probably get to that in a second, but right now I'm coming fresh out of the way that you actually present the adventures in the archive, and you mentioned this just now. The way that you talk about your adventures in the archive in a way that it's hard for me to put myself in the shoes of a general audience, whatever that means. It's too late for me. Save yourselves. I've already been tainted by nerdiness for many years. But I can imagine that, an educated, somebody with a bachelor's or master's reading this and going through that journey with you is probably feeling it like, oh, maybe I shouldn't trust everything that I read in every biography, because look what happens when somebody actually tells me what's the story about these things we find in the archive. And in this sense, my question is simple. Do you think this book can be used in when you were writing, do you think you also wanted to like help people in classes, both history and in literature, actually, with a text that can walk students who are just starting through the dangers, pitfalls, challenges, obstacles of like doing archival research? Because it reads a lot like that. And I am totally thinking of teaching it just for that. Besides the history, like here is like, it's not that you don't trust anything. It's like you're gonna weigh things based on like chain of transmission, but also all kinds of things. Anyways, that's the question. What were your thoughts as you were writing this in terms of like how this can actually serve as a teaching instrument? Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that, because I'm glad that came through, because I really had to try to say, okay, I can trust my readers. Like you said, my readers there's like hugely narrative quality to the book. So any reader who just wants to read through and get the information, but if they also just find themselves saying, but how did this decision get? How do we know this information? That information is there as well. And so I remember thinking, oh, are people going to want to read about, how I reconstructed the story? And at some point I just thought, but I think that is something that can make the biography different. And when I presented to other biographers, to have them say, oh, wait, you're like giving a gift to the people who will come after you to write about Christophe, because now you've given them names and connections. And even if I couldn't definitively prove it, that they could say now their path hopefully might be a little bit easier. And then also the questions about the way we go about writing biographies. I think that there was a temptation to put a lot of things in footnotes, but you kind of put things in footnotes when you're subordinating it. I mean, sometimes you're creating a whole other story that exists alongside in the footnotes. And I mean, Michel Gautrillot in Silencing the Past is someone whose footnotes are amazing, and people should read them if they tend to just read the narrative, because the footnotes are great also. But I really wanted it to be part of the story because it wasn't separate, which is why I opened the prologue with all the fictional representations as well, because I could just say like, oh, that's fiction and who cares, and it doesn't matter to this story because I'm writing a biography. But almost all of the people who are naturally inclined to read this book, in terms of they already know a little bit about, the new readers, which I hope will be a lot, who don't really know the story at all, this is there for them too, because people would say to me, oh yeah, I know all about Christophe. I read about him in Derek Walcott, Alejo Carpentier, Aimé Césaire, C.L.R. James. What a great character. And yes, he is a literary character, but he was also a historical figure. And that seemed to be, in his case, it seemed to be really mixed up in a way that I don't really see with Dessalines, for example, who's highly defamed and highly portrayed in kind of a savage manner. But people don't tend to equate the literary characters and the literary depictions with him as much as they do Toussaint Louverture and Henri Christophe, who are the two who people were just really fascinated with, especially in the early 20th century. It's really Dessalines who gets the short end of the stick in the fictional representation. So I'll just say, yes, I'm glad. I hope people will teach it in a methodological way, and those who will read it for the story, I hope they enjoy that. But also that there are, I hate to say the word new, but there are things to come across in the archives. When we have questions, we do not have to resort to constant speculation. That will be a part of so many historical narratives, but we don't start there. We don't start there. We start from a place of remembering that the French wrote everything down to a fault. I call them their crimes. They documented their own crimes against humanity. So let's go into that documentation. And instead of being mad at them for writing all of that down, I say use it against them, because that's certainly what I do. They wrote it all down there. And so when we want to know about Napoleon's crimes and the French get mad at me, they're the ones who wrote it all down. He's the one who sent all those letters admitting all his plans. And typing things up and publishing them in newspapers. That they are the ones who documented this for us, which doesn't make the documentation the enemy. The documentation is actually there for us to probe, and we go along with it, and we doubt it, and sometimes we contest it, but it's not our enemy.
Thank you, Marlene. I will take my privilege here and ask questions before I pass to all of you. There are many questions in the chat, and some people have their hands raised. Continuing the question that Alex asked, I have two short questions. And I am like about half of the book. I didn't finish the book yet. Then my question would be, first, the issue regarding the archives. What about the archives in Haiti, which we know the answer, but perhaps people do not know. And I would like to know from you, like the research, were you able to do any research in Haiti, and whether there is any kind of possibility of doing that, either in the archives, and of course with the sites of memory associated with Christophe, considering, for example, the palace itself. Also, any kind of memory of Christophe in Haiti today. This because you work with these displays and these representations of him in popular culture. But I ask myself, how do people in Haiti today they see Christophe? And the other question I have is related to the old work that I saw about Christophe, but it's a question that remained unanswered, which is what was his then the relationship between this monarchy that he creates with all the institutions and all the I would say the insignias and so on. How do this does relate to Africa? Because when you are talking about the monarchy, then we relate with Britain, we relate it to France as well. But where is the place of Africa in Christophe's story?
Oh, wow. Yeah, those are great questions. I wrote them down, so hopefully I will be able to touch on all of these points. To the first question about archives in Haiti, Alex knows the answer to this because somebody asked me this at one of the other events, but yes and no. So I am lucky to have archivist friends and colleagues in Haiti to help me with documents, send me documents, that the images of documents they know I'm interested in. And so I'll say Patrick Tardieu was one of those, a very important archivist in Haiti, Daniel Souplice, Louis Clormeus, who were sharing with me letters and images and newspaper issues from that are one of which is now on the La Gazette Royale website that is located in Haiti, the only issue of the newspaper that is still in a Haitian library or archive as far as we know. So I was able that way to get around a few obstacles. Pays Loc, for example, happened. The last time I went to Haiti was in 2018. Pays Loc started happening, I believe it was at the end of 2018 or beginning of 2019, which is their version of lockdown, but it wasn't related to COVID. It was before that. It was the political unrest that was happening. And then COVID came. So we had COVID lockdowns there. And then after the assassination of the Haitian president in July 2021, it just became increasingly obvious to me that it was going to not really be possible and safe to go to Haiti. And when, friends and historians and colleagues who are there saying, no, don't come, this isn't a good time, that made it incredibly difficult. But I was grateful to people who were there, keeping these documents safe, which also I will say about inspiration, inspired me when they're saying, yes, we're in a political crisis, but we want to help. We want you to write this story. This is important. And they're there in the National Archives trying to also protect the documents and make sure that people don't burn and steal and loot them, because this is a question of historical patrimony, and it is about dignity, and it is about the story that people want to pass down, because there's a tendency to think, well, who cares? It doesn't really matter. These are the only things that matter. But people who are, they care, and they care deeply about this. And so this, I think, allows me to talk about the popular memory. So, I mean, it's so varied with Christophe. So when I tell, when I would meet people at HSA, for example, people, Haitians I didn't know yet, but academics, scientists, political scientists, economists, and what are you working on? Oh, I'm writing a biography of Henri Christophe. They sometimes go, oh, yeah, that's gonna be rough. I could tell they would say, oh, and some of them would say, he's a very controversial character. I'm like, oh yes, I am very aware of that. And how are you going to deal with all of that? So I would get a lot of that. I didn't really get anyone who was saying, like, that's a terrible, historical figure, no one should ever study him. People are fascinated, but also kind of worried, like, what will you have to tell? What will you be revealing? But in the north of Haiti, there are plenty of people who love Christophe. If you look at the Facebook page of the Marie du Cap-Haïtien, I mean, you will see around anniversaries for things that have to do with Christophe, there are celebrations there. But the Haitian painter, Edouard Duval-Carrier, recently told me that he was in the north of Haiti. I think he said it was in like the 80s or 90s. And they were doing one of their celebrations, but they were singing a song about Christophe that was clearly a historical song. And it was like a terrible song. So he was like confused. Like, is this a commemoration to him? Is it a celebration? Like, what is this? Like, and I'm thinking, I need to hear this song. Clearly, I want to hear this song. And so there's definitely varied opinions. Some of it is regional. Jean Casimir always likes to make a joke, when you're talking about any of these figures, are you in the north or the south? Because the answers are going to change. For example, Pétion, Alexandre Pétion in the south is not viewed the same way he is definitely in the north, more demonized and so I would say it's highly variable. And I actually, at the very end of the book, I won't give out a spoiler, but in the epilogue, I do kind of talk about that as well, because there's a phenomenon when you go to Haiti and you go to the Citadel, you will get a guide. And your guide is going to take you up this very dangerous 35-degree angle. You will be terrified and you will be on a donkey because no, you can't get a motorized vehicle up there, and you are going to fear for your life on the way up there. Like, you're going to fall off, like what's going to happen? But this guide is going to give you a story about the king the whole entire way up. And it is going to be, it's based on the whims of the person you get that day who finds you, and you give them money and they start weaving the story. And it might be the most sensational things you've ever heard. It might be extremely serious, but you're going to have an experience. And so I truly hope that more people will be able to have that experience soon. Literally, people write about it. I talk about the famous New York Times article that was written about one of the guides. So that's there at the end of the book if you're interested in that. Okay, the question about Africa. So it's a complicated question. So in the book, I talk about how they called them new Haitians because Christophe was famous. Pétion and Boyer did it to a certain extent as well, but for capturing slave ships and stealing all the cargo, including the human beings who were being forcibly transported across the sea, and letting them live in Haiti. And so they would say, oh, we have these Hausa speakers over here. So in one of the episodes, these Hausa speakers are on the ship and they come off and the Haitians are greeting them and they're clapping and singing and dancing, and the Hausa speakers hear other people in Haiti speaking their language. And so the way the story is written about, they all start embracing one another, and they feel like they found their kin, even though it's not their literal kin, but they're relieved to be there. So there's that aspect of it, how the kingdom portrayed these new Haitians being kind of integrated into Haiti. But then from a cultural standpoint, it's interesting that the monarchy is set up to be, it's kind of mimics French monarchy, even though Christophe has an affinity for British, everything British, including the English language. But his personal guards, which is a huge body, is called the Royal Dahomey.
Yes.
His wife's personal guards, for female, they're called the Amazon. And Haitian writers themselves have been confused about the origins of that term. Sometimes they'll say it's this mythical South American body of female fighters, and then sometimes they locate them in Africa. They don't really ever say that's not that's the name the Europeans get, because it's not really in their consciousness necessarily that this is a European name. To them, they're giving a nod to African culture and incorporating it into Haiti. So we see that, but other than I would say that really it's the people who are there, probably more so than any true attempt to connect with cultural forms in Africa other than through Vodou, but which is outlawed in the kingdom. So it's much harder to trace.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Marlene.
We have so many in the chat too. So I think we can start with the live voice ones. And then, I don't know, what are you thinking?
Yeah, go ahead. Let's start with Adolfo and then Michael, and then we move to the chat.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for writing this book. This is amazing. So my question has to do with the fact that this is like a question that I think that I have for a lot of books, if not all books. As someone who grew up in Haiti, and sometimes I sort of like read Haitian historians, and I feel like a lot of it is like it's not necessarily like completely truthful, because I think it presents the Haitian Revolution as like this like sui generis thing, as opposed to like a 19th century phenomenon that's basically grounded in Europe, probably in European classics, as much as it's grounded in like in Vodou ritual, so Africa or whatever, and like Taino thought and that kind of stuff. And I have a particular question about and I know that I've read parts of your book, so I haven't gotten there yet. It's a pretty long book, so but one of the questions is like, is this big elephant that's always thing with me, which is like the Haitian Revolution as a history of like applied ideas. And so like, to be frank or to be honest, right? As opposed to like presenting this as like quite simply like something that came out of nowhere or something of the sort. Like who are like either like the folks that you found in the archive, or who are to you like the writers or the books that like inspired these people, whether it be Aristotle or Plato, or like I think Kant was like the 1700s or something of the sort, which I think is like it's like an honest question. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. This is actually like a question I hope I answer in my previous book, Awakening the Ashes, which is about the intellectual history of the Haitian Revolution. And no, they weren't talking about Kant or any of the European philosophers. They were talking about Ana Kauna and Kaunabo and the indigenous population that the French called cacique, these leaders of the pre-Columbian era of the island of Haiti. And they were talking about what happened to them when they encountered Spanish invaders. So they talk about Caunabo being deported. People talk a lot about wars and disease, but one of the other things the Spanish did was they deported people. And so Caunabo is one of those people the Spanish were trying to deport. And so the Haitians say, oh yeah, this is like the historical corollary to Toussaint Louverture is, what happened to him correlates to what happened to Caunabo. They talk about Ana Kauna, who was put to death by the Spanish in the early 1500s. They talk about Enriquillo, who had a quote unquote maroon treaty with the Spanish and in the mountains of Bajuroco and what's now the Dominican Republic, that those were their inspirations. They said they tried to fight and lost, and we, instead of, that doesn't mean that they can't be our inspirations. It actually means that what we need to do is we need to oppose force for force and make sure that we don't get tricked by false promises, which is, again, why they relate Toussaint Louverture to Caunabo and to the situation with Ana Kauna, when you walk into a scenario with enemies and you're ambushed. And so when Dessalines returns the name of the island to its indigenous appellation, I think it's a pretty strong and clear signal that his inspiration is not Rousseau, like Alexandre Pétion later, when they create the Republic of Haiti, they quote Rousseau and they start talking about the influence of Republican France, but not Napoleon. And they definitely, bring in some of those Enlightenment thinkers. But in the revolution itself, and the writers who wrote about it and chronicled it afterward, who lived through it nonetheless, they are talking about, their influences are Macandal. They're talking about Docan, a maroon community in Docan in the 18th century. They're talking about, as Vate calls it, those brave inhabitants of the forest. They don't use the word maroon, marron, because this is a French word to describe fugitives and how the French are trying to capture them. So this is not like the positive connotation that the word maroon and marron has today. In their era, that was a French word used to try to capture somebody and bring them back into the fold of slavery. And so Vate calls them those brave inhabitants of the forest. You will also see Toussaint Louverture in one of his pamphlets describe his inspiration as literally the Blue Mountain Maroons of Jamaica. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it seems like from much later writing, oh, enlightenment is happening at the same time. Enlightenment, entre guillemets, because it was a very not enlightened time in terms of what they were, people who were, professing this philosophy were busy, taking away the rights and lives of many, many people and having zero respect for humanity. And the freedom fighters, the revolutionaries, are not talking about them. They're talking about, again, the Blue Mountain Maroons of Jamaica and Enriquillo and fugitives, and saying those people living in the forest. That's our inspiration.
So sorry, I just wanted to say the reason why I think that, like, I'm a little confused about this, and I think that they could be talking about both, right? Is that like their kids, or like whoever they are, right? They move down to the South, right? Because a lot of the people, like, this idea of authenticity, like, a lot of them end up becoming those who serve the Pétion Republic, right? Which is why I think that Leslie Maniga is such a great historian, because he essentially shows that a lot of these folks, I mean, they have like different lives and that kind of stuff. And like they immediately see, that's the part of it that I'm so confused about, right? Especially as someone who grows up in the country and stuff like that. Like, it's like they immediately start to be a certain way. Like, really, like the counter revolution happens in 1806, which includes, to me, Christophe, right? Christophe, one of the reasons why Dessalines is assassinated. So to me, I see what you're saying, but like, why is there suddenly, like, not even like 20 years later, like a massive cultural shift wherein like pretty much everything about the society. I also like I also own old Haitian documents and something of the stuff of the sort, and you see like their writing in the old documents. There, I mean, I don't know. So I see what you mean, and I think that I respect your research and expertise on this. But to me, it's still a question because it's like, why does it happen so quickly? Like within 20 years, like the thing is just like we're 1820, we're shocked in like a straight up counter revolution by people who participated in the revolution.
I mean, I don't think it's sudden. I think it exists alongside because we're talking about different people, right? Like, Pétion has a very specific trajectory, and even André Rigaud has a very specific trajectory. Like, they're not all the same. So, and what happens is that the people who had a different ideology came to power, and then they got to shape the narrative, and then they got to tell the story the way that they wanted to tell the story. I think that's actually what happens is not that it's that the other stuff didn't. So it's not even a massive cultural shift. It's a massive change in who is in charge and who gets to then remember that we're having state-run press, so gets to tell the official story of the country, and they tell it in a way that serves their interests, which is, oh, we want to go towards republicanism. We're down with the despots and the monarchs. And I would say I don't agree that Christophe is a part of that other camp in that cultural shift, because you'll see when you get to those chapters in the book, but I talk a lot about Christophe's relationship to the assassination of Dessalines and to the plot, but I'll let you read that part first, and then yeah.
All right, thank you. Michael?
Thank you so much.
Michael?
I was wondering to what extent, and I know it's a long book, but to what extent Boyer's disastrous decision, in your words, is either addressed directly or there are implications questioning. Well, it's a great question to ask anyone, what would you do in that situation? Because I think the French came with ships, armed ships. So I was wondering to what extent that appears in the book. I guess if it does, it appears at the end. It's coming today. I don't have it yet, but I'm going to read it regardless. I'm just wondering to what extent that that appears.
Can I jump in to save time? Because my question's a follow-up. It was going to be on almost the same thing.
Oh, hi, Alyssa.
Hello.
Okay.
First, that was wonderful, Marlene. I've been waiting for this for a long time. It's lovely to see it come to fruition. My copy is in my office, but I've got Alex's here on my shelf. Anna's also advertising it. What I was going to ask is very similar to Michael, or a kind of a follow-up, and it's a little bit mischievous, but you said that Christophe had said no to the indemnity very strongly, which then led me to want to ask you for your statement on this position then. Alex Dupuy, of course, has been arguing that it was voluntary, right, for Pétion and Boyer to be pursuing this. And the way that we usually talk about the indemnity is that the French forced it on Haitians. But you said Christophe said no, and it didn't happen. So as my follow-up to Michael, then I'd like to ask, do you think then that Boyer didn't have to do it? And I'll stop there.
I'm glad you asked this, because I've talked to Alex Dupuy and I respect him enormously. And I actually don't think that we might sort of get to the question, to the answer of this differently, but I don't actually think we have different positions on this. But I don't want to speak for him, but I think I see his point of view, which is that this was a choice of Boyer's, which let me unfold how I talk about it in the book. So to get to both of your questions. So the last part of the book is an epilogue, and it's called The Greatest Heist in History. And it is directly about and tells the story of the indemnity. But along with telling the story of the indemnity, you will see that it is actually very surprising that Boyer decided to do this. And let me say why, because I always make this joke of I never wanted to know so much about French kings, and sometimes I'm very sad that I had to learn about so many French kings. But Louis XVIII, who was restored to his throne in 1814 and 1815, respectively. Ask me how that happens. Alyssa knows because she's a French historian. But when Napoleon is forced to abdicate his throne for the first and the second time, so Louis XVIII comes back. Both times he immediately starts trying to plot to quote unquote restore Saint-Domingue, which is their euphemism for bringing back slavery and colonialism, right? And so even though Christophe is saying the indemnity is inadmissible, you know who else said it was? Louis XVIII. He was completely against this, but he dies in 1824. And his brother, Charles X, comes to power. And I always say this, you have to imagine that in all these years since the revolution, the ex-French colonists are the whiniest people in the world. They are papering the earth with pamphlets, crying about their lost revenues and their plantations, and they are ridiculous. Vinod de Charmilly is in England just waiting for the Bourbons to come back. He's like, I will give you all the money to finance another basically Leclerc expedition, which is an insane thing to want to waste your money on. If you still have money, why would you waste it on this, right? Even the foreign newspapers of countries where slavery still exists, England, the United States, are saying France is crazy if they think that they won't be able to recover this possession with another expedition. And clearly they've learned nothing. They did learn nothing from that, except they try to, as soon as they realize that when the Haitians say liberty or death or independence or death, they mean it, Louis XVIII does a slight pivot and says, okay, what about suzerainty? This is under the period of Boyer. Boyer, and just like Pétion before him, knew the Haitian people would never accept this. Whenever that was floated, their ministers all around them, their secretaries, people said, no, we will never, ever be able to get this through. So whether they wanted to do that or not, or whether they were just presenting it because that's the offer on the table. And so Boyer sends one last delegation to France just before the death of Louis XVIII. And again, no deal, because that suzerainty is on the table, making Haiti a protectorate of France. But Charles X listens to those colonists. He comes up with this amount, which, let me just tell you, the 150 million francs, the colonists and their whininess, they're still not happy. They bring a lawsuit. The original amount that the colonists asked for was 750 million francs in 1804. That was their original amount. The reason that they're unhappy with the 150 million francs is this is designed to compensate them for 1 year of lost revenue. That's it. It's not supposed to be compensation for everything. And this is clearly spelled out, not just in their lawsuit, but in the 3 ledgers that list the names and the descendants of all the people. France kept all these records of all the people who got an indemnity, the exact amount. You can see sometimes it was a relatively small amount, 14,000 francs. Sometimes it was a large amount, 75,000 francs for the big sugar plantations. And this is for 1 year's lost revenue. So they are still upset about it. But the part that you'll see about Boyer, to get back to your question, Alyssa, is that he does an about face like this. When that delegation he sent came back and said no deal with France, he told the Haitian people, get to work. We need all the forts to be supplied. They're coming to make war against us. Everybody, we need every single person's hands in this to stop whatever you're doing and start working on the defenses of the country. And so then when the Baron de Macquart, the French diplomat, shows up with these, hundreds of cannons and this huge fleet of ships, what made Boyer take that step? It would be wrong, I think, to say, oh, he just decided that was the best thing. I mean, there's clearly something happening there because he was prepared to go to war. That's what he told the Haitian people was going to happen. And then he signs, and Charles X paints himself as the true liberator of the Haitian people.
Thank you. Alex, do you want to visit the chat? Because I don't think that we have more people with their hands raised.
Yes, I think the first question was a while back. So because we have several in the chat. So it's Jacques Aymeric. if Jacques is still in the room and would like to join us here on camera, please feel free.
Yes.
Jacques, yeah, you don't have to
Yes.
turn your camera on if you want, but of course it's always nice for people to be able to
No,
see
I will not turn it on because the connection with Accra can be so thank you very much for this presentation. I really enjoy it, and directly as an archaeologist, I'm mainly interested but to know if apart from the citadel, the palace, if there I never been in Haiti. So I don't know if there are any other place, things, object that speak about the material life of King Christophe, because well, it's good to tell the story, but sometimes we also need to see some visual things that really remind about this story, things that can complement the image and the archive. And anyway, things that can be interesting for archaeologists. I mean, thank you very much for the presentation. I don't have the book yet because I have to wait when I will be back in the other side of the Atlantic. Then I will get the book soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. I think you said that you're joining us from Dakar, a city that I love. So I'm so happy.
Accra.
Accra.
Okay. I thought you said Dakar. Well, Accra, I've never been there, but I would love to go there too one day. Thank you for your question. Yes, there are. So obviously, of course, there's archaeological work being done at the palace as well. Cameron Monroe is one person who's really involved in that. He's an archaeologist out at the University of California, Santa Cruz. But Christophe had other castles all around Haiti. So those castles and forts, and there are still remnants of those that exist, and that can be observed and visited hopefully one day. And then there's also just, I think of cities that I associate with Christophe, like Limonade, for example, which is where Christophe had his stroke in August 1820, that one of the things that precipitated his downfall. And then the artwork that the kingdom left behind is just voluminous. We have the Armorial of Haiti, which is located in the Royal College of Arms, actually in London. And there is a book about it called The Armorial of Haiti edited by Clive Cheeseman, that recreates all the different insignia and the coat of arms of the various members of Christophe's nobility. And then the print culture as well. So I think there are things that are definitely more, located on the grounds in Haiti, that it would be amazing to do walking tours one day through, for example, Bois Caïman, and there's a statue commemorating the Battle of Vertières in northern Haiti, but to experience it that way. But I think in the absence of being able to do that for most people outside of Haiti right now, I think we are looking more to art, to the music. There are scholars like Henry Stoll and working with Haitian musicians to recreate some of the operas, so that people will have a better sense of, what was life like in the kingdom. And the work of LaGrace Benson, I would say, on the Citadel and her team, and they are recording all the names of the laborers as well, because we do have the names of many of them through the letters. They talk about people who were sent up to work there. So trying to record those names and honor that history in that way as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we have, there was a question from Michelle Rigaud, which goes back to the beginning of the book and the long section on the Savannah War. And it's a very simple question. Who decided to invite and select the Haitians to fight in Savannah? Now, if Michelle Rigaud wants to say something else, it was so short that I thought I'd just read it out loud. Michelle wants to say anything else? Welcome to join us. And now, take it away. Who decided that La Compagnie de Cousin, what's the name of it?
Chasseurs volontaires.
Wait. So
So
who was it?
The French government, so the governor of Saint-Domingue in particular, puts out a notice in the Affiche Américaine, which is the most important of the newspapers, saying we're recruiting for this body of people and they're going to go and, you know, fight in our Caribbean and North American campaigns. And that's what happens, that people respond to that call. It's not just people from Saint-Domingue. There are other companies of people from Martinique and elsewhere in the Caribbean. And that's how they recruit them. And they are under the they are being led by General Contestin. And so wherever he goes, they go on this particular campaign. And that happens to be to Savannah, Georgia. So that's how that happened.
All right. And the next one is also a simple question. And that is whether your publisher or you are already working on multiple languages. Is the book being translated?
From your lips to God's ears, because everyone asks me that. And I don't own the translation rights, so I cannot pursue on my own any translations of the book. There will be a British version of the book published by Yale University Press for circulation in Europe, but of course it will still be in English. But I hope that one day a French publisher, which is what I really need, translators, I know we can find translators who, I know many translators who would translate. But what we really need is a French publisher, because that is how Knopf, which is owned by Penguin Random House, will release the rights for French. Haitian Creole, I believe they would release the rights for that more easily. And then, you know, from there, any language, you know, would be great, because I always say the more the merrier with this story. Fascinated Germans, Russians, that there are plenty of people who would want to read, I hope, about the first and last king of Haiti.
Yes, I agree. The French one is going to be fire. And so now we have a big question from Alexandra Gelbart, and I don't know, Alexandra, if you're here still and you want to ask it. It's a good question. It's multi-part, actually. Alexandra?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So first off, thank you for this work. It's really engaging and serves as a great model too for writing histories that have this kind of complex archival narrative, or archive and narrative. I'm curious about what kind of diplomatic reach King Henry had. And I'm thinking specifically, I work in Eastern Cuba predominantly, and you know, the Haitian Revolution increases the population of Santiago de Cuba, just as that city, by an estimated 200 to maybe 400%. And then throughout the rest of Eastern Cuba, and there's a really strong self-liberated African marronage system happening. So I'm curious if he had a diplomatic reach to other Caribbean locales. And then, given his interventions in the transatlantic trade of enslaved Africans, was he participating or had that kind of, you know, diplomatic relationship with other locales that were also fighting similar liberation movements?
Yes, I do briefly talk about this in the book as well, because what is very interesting is Christophe has a lot of friends in Great Britain, but they're mostly located in England. And then, of course, he has his doctor, Duncan Stewart, who's from Scotland. And they come to these British merchants, writers, they come to the island, and sometimes they teach, sometimes he recruits them to teach. He recruits artists and mathematicians, and he also invites clergy, Anglican clergy, for example, to come. So he's got this great relationship with England. But then if we go over to the British colonies, his name is like a horror. He's feared. A man named Thomas Strafford. This is another one of those like archival things that I'm so sorry. It makes me so nerdy. It was like very exciting to learn about this because it was so suggestive. But this man named Thomas Strafford is there in the kingdom, and he lives there for a couple of years, and he's like a special guest of Christophe's. He's at all these very important dinners. And when he goes back to Kingston, he has a pamphlet written by the Baron de Vatte, which is it's book-sized, and he gets arrested and he gets thrown into jail. And the indictment is more than 30 pages, and it contains original French transcriptions from the book and then English translations. So I call it translation for the purposes of indictment. And they're like, you had this book, which is all about dismantling pseudoscientific theories of race, mind you. But you had this book. You are here on behalf of Henri Christophe to sow the seeds of destruction and rebellion and encourage slave revolts. That's what you're here, and you're going to go to jail. And he goes on trial, and they write about it in the Jamaican newspapers, and he ends up being acquitted, sort of. Like, he's guilty of having the book, but he's not guilty of evil intent, they say, because he says, oh, my Haitian housekeeper must have accidentally put it in my effects, which is not true, because you can see that he, through Christophe's letters, that he gave special commissions to Thomas Strafford. So he definitely worked on behalf of him. He wasn't bringing it for the purposes of slave revolt and rebellion. He was bringing it to have it translated. The translator of Baron de Vate is a British botanist by the name of William Hamilton, and he was also there at the same time as Thomas Strafford. So they were trying to destroy slavery, but through abolitionist kind of actions like writing books. With Cuba, he has a very strained relationship, because some of the ships that he's capturing are on their way to Cuba, and some of those ships retaliate by going onto the beaches of Haiti and capturing men and women. And so at one point, Christophe gets into a very testy exchange with the governor of Cuba and is like, you must immediately relinquish these prisoners. You must send them back. If you took them to Jamaica, you need to go, because he's hearing these rumors, oh, he sent them here, he sent them there. You must bring them back. And the governor relents and sends them back. And it's astonishing. But so that is, most of his relations with the other Caribbean islands are fraught relations. And so I would say that's, they are concerned with liberation movements, but they have in their constitution that they are not going to immerse themselves in the affairs of other islands of this Caribbean or in this archipelago. And Baron de Vate's famous phrase on that score is, Haiti is one of the islands of the Antilles and is not itself the Antilles. So they say they will capture slave ships and set people free, but they will not send, they criticize Pétion for sending freedom fighters over to fight with Bolivar and for giving Bolivar money. They criticize Pétion for that and say, you know, that's against our constitution, because it was also against the constitution for the Southern Republic to immerse themselves in the affairs of the other islands of this hemisphere.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. I see a question from Leighton, but Leighton, give us a chance, because there was a big question by Markley Mathurin in the chat that it's really good, and been waiting. I don't know if Markley is still here and would like to ask. If not, we can go to Leighton. If Markley's not here, we can probably go to Leighton, if we can return to that if we have time.
Oh, I'm here. I thought you were gonna read it for her. Sorry.
I see it. Yes, I see the questions.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll jump in then. Okay, so the first question is, do you highlight any of the figures involved in the conspiracy to destroy the kingdom? Oh, yes. Yes, I absolutely do. And there's some fascinating people there. I'll just say one of them involves the man who was married to a woman who's believed to be one of Christophe's illegitimate daughters. And this really shocked, this man's involvement really shocked Prince Victor's teacher, William Wilson, who was there and chronicled. I follow a fair bit from William Wilson's day. You'll see in the Dessalines assassination chapter and in the Christophe death chapter, I really try to pull the reader in by focusing on a person who was there in the case of Dessalines' death, Christophe, and how they experienced learning this news. And William Wilson, the Crown Prince's teacher, as he watched what happened to Christophe and then what happened to his son and his reactions as he kind of goes along in the days and aftermath of that. So I do. Have I conducted any research on the king's remains? I have not, and I would love to. If COVID and Pays Loc and all of that hadn't happened, I wanted to go back to the Citadel. Sometimes when you are experiencing something from really just a very young person in my 20s who wasn't doing any of this research at all at the time, I thought, why didn't I pay more attention to exactly where the plaque is in the Citadel? And I was going back through old pictures and I was trying to see, why didn't I take more pictures of that? So that I had intended to go back and really think more about that as his place of burial, which again, I didn't really think about the very first time only time I went there. Are there any plans to release a French version of your book? We talked about this. I hope so. And do you think Christophe could have done more to protect the crowned prince? I don't think so because, well, I guess it depends on how, you know, I'm not sure that Christophe thinks something bad is going to happen to his son after his death.
I want to add a little bit, sorry to cut you off.
Okay.
Just considering what happened to Ferdinand, I
Yes.
thought he would have been more careful to ensure that the crown prince was well protected. And
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm very upset about that. So I wanted to hear your input about it.
Well, you'll see in the book, William Wilson, I mean, Marie-Louise is upset about this, but William Wilson, the prince's teacher, is also very upset about this because he says, you know, they didn't have to do this. He's a teenager, you know, like, are they really afraid of this teenager? But what the conspirators say when they put him to death is, like, you could make a claim to the throne because you were in the Constitution as the heir to the throne. And so if the king dies, you're the replacement. So you have to pay for this with your life. And but they also killed the king's other son, Prince Eugène, which is his son from a previous relationship before he married Marie-Louise. They killed the Baron de Vathey. They kill Jean-Philippe Daut. They kill all of the loyalists. And so I also follow in the end the people who didn't get put to death, the supposed Christophe loyalists who didn't get put to death, and how did they survive? But I think that Christophe thought there would be more clemency for his son. That's the only thing that I can imagine, because how, just as you've said, he saw what happened to his other child, but that was, he blamed Napoleon and he blamed the French and French duplicity and colonists, and they're the most evil people in the world. And in fact, you'll see in the book that according to the South, I don't want to give away, like, things didn't go as planned, let's just say, with the aftermath of Christophe's death. In that 10 days period, things didn't go as planned. And so I think you would see there is a reason why that happens. It's not going to be satisfying in terms of the outcome and the child's fate. But there was a plan, and the plan was not followed. I'll just say that.
All right,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
So good.
Thank you.
Leighton, I don't know if Leighton wants to come. Leighton, you want to come in?
It's afternoon. Sorry. Afternoon. Professor Daut. I really enjoyed reading. Really enjoyed reading your work. I haven't gotten the book yet. I'm currently I'm going to make my point of getting that very soon. But it's just there's just one thing I wanted to ask, because I come across this because when I'm reading through books on Haitian history, and other books pertaining to that and Dominican Republic, I see that sometimes how is it we know that I wonder if you could point where exactly do we come across the name Haiti correlating to the original name of the island. I know that a lot of the, as you explain in Awakening the Ashes, the early Haitian generals or the Haitian writers connect back to Enrique and the Taínos, creating similarity between their rebellion and what happened back then, creating that theme. I was wondering, where do we find the Taino name Haiti showing up in the historiography? Because sometimes I come across Haiti and I come across another name for Quetzalcoatl, coming when I'm looking at words like I don't know if your colleague Anne Eller has in hers We Dream of Freedom. I'm sorry if I'm rambling. Just how do we just a question because I come across that because I come across this a lot in my reading.
Yeah, so definitely the revolutionaries said they were changing the name of the country back to Haiti, one of its indigenous appellations. And we do find, so the historiography on the name of this island that Columbus renames La Isla Hispaniola or Hispaniola is, I don't want to say the historiography is mixed. I actually think it's pretty clear. It's just that the information is confusing. So some of the early Spanish explorers and those who chronicled the story of Columbus's arrival and aftermath talk about, yes, they're calling the island Haiti, and it's spelled in, like, I found like very, very crazy spellings of this that are sometimes mind-boggling, the spellings, but I mean, I have to remember that it's like the 15th and the 16th centuries. And they did use other names. So, but one that's a little bit later is Quisqueya, and that's one that the Dominicans cite a lot as well. I'll let Alex speak to that maybe, but also, yes, the work of Anne Eller and many of our other colleagues doing great work on the relationship between Haiti and the DR. And then what we have to remember is that the island was broken up into 5 main principalities, and each of those principalities had their own names, Magua, Marion. I mean, and so talking about one name for the whole island, it seems pretty clear from the historiography of that period that there were different names. And so then the question is, well, why did the Haitians choose Haiti? And that's the one that they chose. And Émile No, later in his Histoire des Caciques, tells us that Haiti means mountainous populated land. Gen Monyon Mon on Haiti, like there are mountains, you see more mountains. So it seems fitting that it was a geographically relevant term to them. They keep saying they don't want to have anything to do with the French language, so it's natural for them to resort to an indigenous word, and that's the one that they chose. But in terms of there's not a definitive, as far as I am aware, source that to show that everyone who was living on that island all called it the same thing. And I think that it's probably because they didn't all call it one thing. And the freedom fighters of Haiti chose one of the appellations they were aware of, first of all, and I think that made sense to them based on the geography of the country.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question. Kind of beautiful as we come up on our time to end with the accent on Haiti itself. And just for the sake of inclusivity, if anybody has one last question and that you feel you didn't get to ask, we can open up for one last question, a quick one. If not, then please join me with your emojis and your cameras or whatever instruments you have at hand in thanking Marlene for her wonderful presentation and for this wonderful book that she has gifted all of us. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, all of you. Thank you for spending your Saturday.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
I'm
you so
looking
much.
forward to see you in my podcast one day.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
But please do not leave. Stick around for a few minutes while Ana Lucia tells us about our next book club. Just give us a couple of minutes.
Yes, just I put in the chat the full calendar. Then we still have one book club next week with James Street, his new book with Oxford University Press. Then it's at the same time, 2 p.m. on Saturday next week. And then we have an entire calendar for the year. I put in the chat. You can just go there and register for the next ones, and keep an eye on social media and different lists where we are disseminating information. But especially because I know that you came for this book, and I know that some of you perhaps you didn't read or didn't get the book yet. So I encourage you to take the book, then to order the book. That is The First and the Last King of Haiti, The Rise and Fall of Henri Christophe, by Marlene Daut, and this is with Knopf, and it was just published a week ago. And follow Marlene, check her website, because she'll be speaking, talking about this book then in different places. Then perhaps you can catch her live somewhere. Otherwise, thank you so much. Thank you, Marlene, and thank you, Alex, for joining me. And thank you all of you who are here. It was great to have